Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michaela Peters. Today I'm going to talk about stubbornness, and I just made this topic up while I was getting ready, which is just like brushing my teeth and stuff, because I just ate. And the reason I started thinking about this topic is because of some conversations I've had with my family recently. So I did sort of like do this announcement on the Russian side of my channel since they're very interested in my whole living problem situation, even though I feel like it's not so interesting to talk about on the English side. I'm like complaining that rent is $2,000 a month where I live and kind of trying to figure out whether it just makes sense to get a mortgage at that rate. And right now, as usual, my parents have kind of made the decision for me where it's like, okay, you're going to go live like below your mom in the same subdivided house. Cool. Okay. But in the meantime, I'm still meticulously scouring the pages of Zillow on the internet and looking for anything that might be somewhat an option. And for instance, I actually found this house this morning and I kind of want to go look at it on Thursday. And one of the, wow, it's like the sun is really moving out there. Okay. One of the things though is that like my mom apparently got mad because with me making the decision to acquire the apartment in Finland, I did not consult anybody with that. And that is true. I actually like only consulted my grandparents. I did not consult my mom or my dad or whoever, because a lot of times when I have a hard time making a decision, I will consult a lot of people. I've talked about this before, but that was one of those decisions where like I had no doubt in my mind that that was a decision that I needed to make, and the whole thing went through so easily, like it didn't even make sense. Like it was just like everything fell into place. And I just feel like for me to like find something here, it would have to be similar. And it's like, why do you need two places to live? Because I'm crazy. Because I want that. That's all I want. Okay, it's not like I need to like become like crazy wealthy or anything. It's just I'm like, all right, I just like want living stability in both places to provide variety and options, and then I just rent out each place when I'm not there. I mean, it works. So my mom was like, you didn't talk to anybody about that and you just went and made that decision. I was like, yeah, because I didn't want anybody swaying me on that decision, because like I knew it was the decision I wanted to make. So with this, I'm going to get into stubbornness and how I think that is a double-edged sword. It's both sort of a blessing and a curse. Now, how can that be? Being stubborn can generally be seen as good when it's used to get something that you're really determined to get. And I'm going to give the example of earlier on in my life when I decided I wanted to go work at NASA, and my mom and my stepmom were both like, what? And my stepmom was like, well, that's a high profile job, and like, you don't need to have that. And I'm like, I mean, high profile, to be honest, the government does not pay that much. I talk about that all the time. Like, that was part of why I did not go to work at NASA, was like, I realized I could make more money having a corporate job. And then I'd have more bargaining power when I went back to work for the government. That's like part of my strategy right now. And as I also realized, just having a job does not necessarily make it easy to like get ahead. It really doesn't. Okay. Yeah, and I actually had this conversation with my dad yesterday. He's like, the person who's constantly worried about whether they're going to pay rent or not, like how to pay rent, is not the tenant you're actually worried about. And I was like, yeah, I get the point. And I'm like, I'm so worried I'm going to go into debt. And he's like, anybody who's like actually worried about that is not the kind of person who's going to end up in that situation. And I was like, he's got a point. I don't know. So sometimes people will like kind of throw things at me, and instead of getting really defensive, I like do take a minute to evaluate whether there's any validity in it. But then sometimes if I'm really sensitive or emotional about it, I will react defensively. Like, I'm not going to lie about that. And it's probably natural. But yeah, with the NASA thing. So my stepmom was like, that's high profile. And I was like, mm-hmm. And then my mom was like, I don't think you're smart enough to get into NASA. Like, I'm not going to say she's wrong with that, in the sense that like, if I were to try again for engineering, like, no, probably not. But for business, it's fine. Like, it's not like every business person dreams of working at NASA. That's generally not how that goes. So they were like, you can't work at NASA because it's too hard to get that job. And I was like, oh, is that a challenge? And then I was like, okay. So that kind of like stubbornness gave me more incentive to go work for NASA, I think, because I wanted to prove them wrong, which like sometimes that is a good incentive for people to go do something. They're like, well, somebody told me I couldn't, and they want to like prove to themselves or to the other people that they can do that thing. And I also have never super felt like there's anything that I can't do. I guess I've always felt like maybe like programming I'm not that good at and somebody shouldn't pay me to do it, even though ironically I do program a little bit at my job, but I just suck at it. But it's why I mostly do data visualization. And sometimes they throw programming stuff at me. Like right now I'm trying to do something in Pandas and it's like, it's not going well. And then I have to like cry to one of my coworkers and get help. That also happened to me when I was working in like Scala. Yeah, it was rough. Okay, whatever. So it's not my strong suit. It's like, there's the expression. So actually somebody told me this, but then I think, this, shout out to the, one Finnish guy who wrote this in my comments. It was like, and this is true, and I've like actually only heard people in Finland say this to me. It's like, if a fish judges its ability by trying to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life thinking it's stupid. So like a lot of my life I spent time telling myself I'm stupid because I'm trying really hard to compensate for things that I'm not actually like good at naturally. And in some ways it's like you're trying to become more proficient in your deficits. But when I listen to people who talk about like becoming wealthy, like that is actually the most terrible way to become wealthy. You should really lean into what your strengths are if you want to become wealthy. Now, I'm supposedly very good at writing, and yeah, so shouldn't I like lean into that to make money? I don't know, because I don't think it's like that easy to make money off of writing. So I haven't really considered that an option. I also like, it's also one of those things that I don't like enough for somebody to pay me to do it. I don't know, whatever. We all have choices. But yeah, so being stubborn, I think, in some ways can be good when you're very determined to, like, get your goals, right? And this is, like, one of the issues right now is it's like, you should go rent for a while. And then I'm like, but I really want to own a house. And I'm, like, so stubborn about this goal that it's like, I just can't stop. I can't stop. Yeah, it's like an addiction. I don't know. And then once I get the thing, I'll calm down, and then it will be the next thing and the next thing. And that's, you know, how life goes sometimes. But, yeah. So on the other hand, though, I think that being too stubborn can make it so that it's very difficult for you to grow and to learn and to be able to consider other people's perspectives. Like yesterday I talked about open-mindedness, and so this all kind of goes along with that. My dog just burped. Ew, kind of gross. Okay. Yeah. There's that. Yeah, I'm not really exactly sure what else I want to add to this discussion, but I have noticed that probably being stubborn and some level of defensiveness goes together. I think this is something I struggle with. I kind of started thinking about how I think some of that is due to the fact that, like, I do notice those behaviors in my family members, so part of it is probably just a learned behavior, but of course awareness is the first step to change, so it is something I'm trying to be more aware of and actively work on. Not saying that makes it easy. But yeah, I think stubbornness and the pursuit of your goals, you know, like being determined more so would be a better way of describing that. Of course, can be seen as a positive, but if you're so stubborn that it's ruining your relationships and you're doing things just to spite people, whether it's to your own advantage or not, that's when it can be a downfall and, quite frankly, not a wise decision. So that's everything I have on that for today. I'm not going to get like too much more ranty or philosophical because I don't think it's that deep. But yeah, this is where I'm at today, where I'm just sort of like, okay, I'm accepting my fate of moving into the expensive apartment, or in the meantime, I'm just going to keep looking, and that's it. It's like a binary sort of situation. But yeah, this is something that I am confused on, so I do consult people with, because I just like really don't know what the best situation is. It is also very interesting because, like, this is like my classic venting / gossip kind of coping strategy. It's very interesting reading the comments on the Russian, because I know that a lot of the Russian people also watch my English videos, but it is really interesting reading the Russian side of the videos where people are like, it's just so interesting to me how much the value, like this preoccupation with your worth as a woman being linked to like being married and having children, and like the fact that it's like I'm talking generally about like moving, right? And it's like, well, you know, the reason you're unhappy is because you're not married and you don't have kids. And I'm like, okay, that kind of has nothing to do with the situation, because me needing to move out by a certain time as ordained by my parents, like how one of these things doesn't belong. It's like these, like it doesn't go together. Like the, you know, you don't, well, actually I was gonna say you don't really control like when those things happen, but like there have been a lot of like news articles I've read where it's like somebody's very specifically like, I want to marry somebody, and then they just like go on dating apps until they find somebody, and then they get married and they have kids, and that was like their goal, and they reached that goal and they just like went and executed that. And like, that's cool. Like, people do that. So, like, don't get me wrong, it's definitely possible. But it's just, like, it's very interesting to me that those things are so intertwined. Like, your housing situation definitely, like, has to be almost like, it's just interesting to me that elicits that kind of conversation. It's also interesting to me that, again, this demographic is, like, approximately, like, 40-year-old men. And I'm like, why do 40-year-old men have such strong feelings about a 30-year-old woman not being married and not having children? It's interesting. So, if you watch this video and you're a Russian person, please explain to me why that is the case. Because I do understand that some of it is a cultural value. Like, I'm really trying to, like, understand this because... And it's like, I do understand it's a cultural thing. Yes, I get that. But, like, it just feels like there's something deeper with it. And I try to understand, is it, like, a frustration? Because this is kind of the thing I've always thought about from, like, certain family members. Is it's like, people almost feel like this is such a weird, like, warped thing. And I feel, like, almost embarrassed admitting that, like, I think that this is what's going on. And I would kind of like to get opinions and confirm this or not for anybody who actually watches this. But, like... people look at attractive people and get frustrated that they're single because it's almost like, obviously, physical attractiveness is what is considered desirable in a romantic relationship because of sexual attraction and reproduction purposes, right? And this is, like, considered, like, better genetics or something. Again, getting into the eugenics thing, which is a little bit like that. I don't know. It's kind of a problem. Because somebody was asking, when somebody was like, don't you think that if you have autism and, like, you could risk passing on autism, that you should not have children because it's selfish? And I'm like, I think that's considered eugenics and that's generally frowned upon, so I'm gonna go with doesn't matter. Also, today I learned from the doctors that, because I did ask a question about autism, and it's like, nobody knows what causes it. So just because you're autistic does not mean that you're actually, like, that has been passed down through, like, your relatives. Yeah, I mean, they try to make up a bunch of things that cause autism, like vaccines, or I've heard, like, lack of oxygen to the brain during pregnancy. That was the other one I heard. That's, like, kind of it. Like, nobody knows. So, whatever. Yep, it's random. But yeah, so... anyway, going back to my weird theory, I think that, like, there's sort of, like, again, this, like, resentment that, like, somebody who's attractive is, like, not married because it's sort of like, it feels like you're wasting your potential, such a, like, weird way of putting it, but, like, that's where the frustration is coming from, because I don't know that necessarily, like, people are like, oh, I want this person, or they're like, there's a problem that this person isn't taken, and it's sort of like, again, there's just, like, a level of frustration that comes from, like, the fact that this person is wasting the fact that they could make somebody happy by their attractiveness. That sounds so stupid to me because, like, I'm not that shallow of a person, and, like, I'm gonna give a very stupid example. Anytime it's like there's a guy I'm interested in, my one friend who probably would consider herself less attractive than me, let's say, is like, you're like a 9 out of 10. Why do you like think that these people who are, like, not attractive are attractive? But I'm like, because it's like, I actually don't feel attracted to, like, very attractive men, because a lot of times I've seen, and this is actually, you can watch a lot of YouTube videos about this, a lot of times the very attractive men have become, like, players. Like, they will not commit. And I'm like, that is literally a waste of my time. Like, I'm not going to go chase a moving goalpost. Like, no, I'm not doing that. So I've just found, like, very attractive men to be, like, dishonest, and I don't want to, like, you know, categorize everybody into that. It's just, like, my interactions with very attractive men have gone that way. So that's why it's, like, not my goal. But yeah, it's like, and I think, so it's also another thing that can happen, right, is, like, from women almost, there can be a level of frustration with, like, if you're attractive, why don't you go for a more attractive person? Because then it's considered, like, settling. Which I saw this thing yesterday that talked about, like, going out and settling is not settling. It's just, like, realistic, because you have to acknowledge that no relationship is going to be perfect. And I'm like, yep, that's legit. Like, that's totally true. So, whatever. I don't know. But it is just kind of, to my point, like, very interesting that any sort of discussion about, like, life transitions, changing events, like, on the Russian side leads to, like, there's a lot of shaming around, like, oh, you should be married and you should have kids. So that's why I keep joking. I'm like, what if you guys found out that, like, I was secretly married and I secretly had 2 kids, and, like, would all of a sudden my channel become unpopular? I don't know, though. It seems like there are a lot of, like, those kinds of channels that people actually watch. So maybe at some point it will become that, and let's see if people still watch it. So, to be continued, I suppose. Alright, so that's it for today, and until my next video. Bye.